Welcome back to part 2 of our Dimension Data 3-part series, Cloud Transformation. It's no longer why or when, but how. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Mariana and I'm the founder and owner of Mariana Carroll Consulting. I will be your host for this session. With me again today, I have our expert panel, Jeff Jack, Principal Head, Cloud Intelligent Infrastructure at Dimension Data. We have Colin McHale, EMEA Territory Sales Director, Global Scale Partners and Programs for Intel Corporation. And we have Greg McDonald, Director of Sales Engineering at Dell Technologies South Africa. We will continue our very pertinent conversation on cloud transformation. If you have missed the first episode, please make sure you go back and revisit the content. In this session, we are discussing the advantages of hybrid cloud. There's always more to do, so let's get the conversation started. Hybrid cloud is considered an effective way to achieve business objectives. As such, most enterprises are already adopting or planning to adopt a hybrid cloud infrastructure. If we again go back to some stats from NTT 451 Research Group report, it shows that 41% of global organizations and 37% of South African companies believe that hybrid cloud has reduced or made their total cost of IT operations more economical. 36% of organizations, both in South Africa and globally, have seen improved overall business agility through hybrid cloud implementation. And more than 40% of South African businesses have seen an improved speed of deploying apps and services due to hybrid cloud. So I think I don't have to say anything more about the advantages of hybrid cloud. So Greg, on that point, I would like to hear from you. In your opinion, how can we unify on-premise and public clouds and operate a seamless, consistent operation between both?
That's a great question, Mariana, and it's one our organization faces regularly, and it's certainly a conversation that's been elevated this year more so than ever before. In my mind, when I think about unifying the cloud experience, I think about traditional locations. You've got an edge location. It could be a mine in the Northern Cape. It could be a autonomous vehicle driving on the streets of Durban here in South Africa. These are all locations which are outside of the global data center or outside of a traditional data center from a South African point of view. And these are locations where data is generated, by the way. Think about smartwatches, where I go to a class and I have my heart rate running and my sort of oxygen levels. And I was reading some articles about some very clever smartwatch technology in that space. Those are all edge locations. Those are all data points where data is generated and are generated at an alarming rate and growing rate as well. Then we also have our private cloud locations. And this is the traditional data center. This is that data center where customers host their applications. And this is an area that Dimension Data and NTT have done incredibly well at. They've got global scale reach, building out data centers and a significant coverage in this particular area. And then finally, we've seen the launch of the hyperscalers themselves. The hyperscalers have really been a big catalyst to drive the cloud conversation and get this whole cloud journey. And if you think about this edge location, think about this private cloud location and this public cloud location, the key here is about providing one cloud experience across all of these locations. When I speak about a cloud experience, I'm speaking about consistency of services, consistency of operations, and consistency of infrastructure. When we take those three factors together, it really is about how do we help customers provide those services across those locations? How do we make sure that the operations are easy to manage? And how do we make sure that we have infrastructure consistency? The way we treat servers, storage, and network has to be the same in each location and built on modern platforms like the software-defined data center. Because when you get that right, data can move seamlessly between locations, and it makes the whole cloud experience that much easier to deliver and factor in as well. And it's a great conversation because I think Dell Technologies, together with the subsidiary organizations like VMware, have really got a solid story in this particular space. And the story is resonating particularly well with South African customers as it does globally. Now, Colin, I know you're from Intel, and I'm quite interested to hear your views on what customers are doing in the cloud space from a spend point of view. Can you give us some insights on a global level as to what that looks like on Intel's view?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. We've been looking at this, and there is very robust cloud growth over the next number of years. The information that that we're getting from various sources. There's kind of probably a 13% compound annual growth rate in digital retail, 10% in digital advertising, digital media and video 17%, and overall the general cloud services bucket to put everything into it is looking like a 20% growth over the next 3 to 4 years. So that's very substantial in terms of what we're seeing and how that transition people are moving to that kind of whole multi-cloud environment.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it's great to hear the insights from an Intel viewpoint of view. Colin, another question for you. I kind of think of to myself around what areas of businesses spending on the cloud, for example. Can you give us a view as to what the trends are globally? Is it artificial intelligence? Is it cloud spend? Is it security? What does that view look like from your side of things?
Yeah, when we look at right now in the middle of the pandemic and kind of what that's forced, we've definitely seen the continued investment in AI. Robotics is another area that perhaps you hadn't thought about, but robotics is an area that we're seeing an investment in. Security is definitely up. The two places that we're seeing right now is security and IoT. And if we think about the conversations that we've had, security with regard to how are people working from home, how are people working wherever they happen to be, and doing that in a secure and safe way, that probably makes sense. It probably connects to the dialogue that we've been having. But IoTG is another area that we're seeing that's up. And I connect that to the economic recovery and the rebooting of economies as we try to get out of the different lockdown and the different phases that we're in this pandemic, and the need for scanning and devices at the edge that can actually real time decide, is it okay for somebody to perhaps go into a train station or go into the workplace or whatever it might be. So those two areas specifically, but still a significant investment in 5G, in blockchain. We mentioned the financial services market earlier in the first series. So I think that they're the areas, they're the general focus that we're seeing as a company at the moment.
Sounds great, Colin. Thanks for the insights as well. Jeff, I'd like to sort of pose the same question to you from a South African context point of view. Can you give us a view as to what areas of business customers are spending given the sort of cloud? Is it artificial intelligence? Is it the automation and IoT that Colin spoke about? What's your view from a South African lens?
So thank you, Greg. And I think what we're seeing is a combination of all of what you've spoken about. So certainly what we've seen coming out of COVID is people understanding, or clients beginning to understand, that their business needs to be more responsive. And so in many instances, the spending in cloud is to allow them to take advantage of the elasticity and the utility that cloud provides. So in the first series, Colin spoke about education, and particularly when we saw universities all of a sudden moving from taking classes back, off premise, and you were studying from home, as my children have been doing, that they had massive issues in scaling out their e-learning applications because they just weren't ready for the amount of students they have online. And we've seen other online retailers have the same problem. If you try to order groceries during lockdown, all of a sudden the websites weren't working that well, and it literally was that they just couldn't keep up with the demand. So what we're seeing a lot of clients looking to adopt cloud, and particularly in the hyperscalers, is to provide them a hang of a lot more elasticity within their environment, so they can respond far quicker to changing demand than they were able to respond in the past. So that's one. Secondly, and to Colin's talking about IoT, we've also seen clients begin to use IoT to optimize their business processes. So whether that's changing the way the clients experience the organization, so adopting, changing the client experience using IoT and using data to be able to drive that, or optimizing the internal business processes in order to become more efficient and more effective, to be able to deliver the same service at a lower cost. So, those are two big areas. Then we've also seen clients start to optimize their on-premise infrastructure as well, because now they want to make the investments they have on their premise and within their data center. They'd like that to operate more in the way they've seen the hyperscalers operate, and get some of that elasticity, get that agility that they've begun to expect from the public cloud or the hyperscalers. They want to start delivering those kind of services from their data centers as well, because the applications that they're trying to deliver demand that they live on premise, but they want that balance, and they want that they want that flexibility that they've begun to expect when using a hyperscaler. So really, it's been a combination of a number of different areas where we've seen clients spend more money in cloud and hybrid cloud particularly. I'll hand over to Mariana. I know, Mariana, you wanted to ask another question.
Yes, and I thank you so much for this amazing conversation. It is really insightful, and there's so many nuggets, golden nuggets that we can take out of it. So thank you to all three of you. Greg, I'm going to ask you a second question, and it's again obviously around hybrid cloud, but we all understand the critical importance of vendor and SLA management. In your opinion, how can we effectively manage our relationships with our public cloud providers to pioneer new wave apps?
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. I think for me, the view is about modern applications ultimately. And we see a significant amount of customers who are on the modern application journey as part of the cloud conversation, because they know they need to modernize their applications to deliver unique or sort of customized services for the staff, for the employees, for their customers in this new modern COVID-19 new normal that we've been exposed to this particular year. And then many organizations have got a significant amount of technical debt in their businesses, and they struggle to modernize the applications. And when you brought about the COVID-19 sort of pandemic and countries went into lockdown, we saw that customers who had a lot of legacy in their businesses have really struggled to sort of keep things going. But those customers who had modern platforms, who had digital innovators or digital leaders really shined. And if you had online presence and you had capacity to scale, you could easily meet the demand for home services or the kind of stuff that Jeff was talking about. But that's not all customers. To be very honest with you, the data shows us that typically about 5% of customers are what we call true digital leaders. These are organizations where the systems and the platforms, the processes, and the technology are all built on modern technology standards. And things like containers, Kubernetes are good examples about that. And we know that Kubernetes is going to be the de facto container standard going forward. And we know that systems that help customers modernize applications is a big opportunity for all organizations, but also an equally complex situation. So to kind of get back to you, answer your question a little bit, Marianne, I think to help with that process and holding customers to account, when you standardize your engagement, even for modern software, on global outsourced technology standards like Kubernetes, for example, and you have the ability to offer Kubernetes across your private clouds, your edge locations, and into your public cloud. And we're able to provide those consistency of services, infrastructure, and operations that I spoke about. It becomes an easy platform for customers to help develop platforms, software, applications very, very quickly. And turning out applications as quickly as possible should become the mandate for all organizations globally. I've heard organizations who were in manufacturing or engineering, for example, stand up on stage at events and say, we are now a software company. We develop software. And I've also seen organizations take a more accurate and more acute view on software development inside their businesses. If you were a developer and looking for jobs, being a developer is probably the best job in the world at the moment, because you can apply your skills on developing creative ideas and concepts. And that for me is really where the heart of modern applications is all about. It's what does the first version look like of the product? How do we move the versions quickly through their cycles, update the features, hold customers, hold staff through great innovation engines and great experience engines? They want this digital experience. They want it now. And they want the ability to buy a customized product very quickly via apps, etc. And that seems like a daunting task for organizations. But if you do have a modern system where the developers and the operators really can run concurrently, it's where DevOps comes to mind. And we can standardize the costs, the infrastructure, the operations, and the services across our edge locations, across our private clouds, and across our global scalers, this is where the power of the system really starts to churn out software at an alarmingly fast rate. And that's how we can absolutely help customers stay ahead of the curve. But also, we can also stay ahead of the cost curve because we now have a hybrid cloud across many multiple hyperscalers. And we can start to look at not being sewn in with a particular vendor. We can keep our costs on our platforms and our choices open because we're picking vendors that are standards based in the industry. And it's a very powerful conversation to add to this sort of mix and the ability to keep SLAs and things honest. Jeff, I know from a South African point of view, your business is directly involved with a lot of lift and shift, which is a big word that we hear from corporates today. What's your experience been like in that particular area? And can you give some examples perhaps of organizations that are trying this application modernization or lift and shift kind of concept?
So thanks, Greg. Lift and shift is one of the 6 R's in cloud migration that people speak of, and it's what typically the R people talk about is rehosting. Now, I think lift and shift is important for clients, and one must look at like what prompts the need in order to lift and shift. And often for clients, it comes down to they're running an application or a workload on infrastructure that's reached a certain point in its life, and they now need to make a choice. Do they reinvest in that infrastructure, or do they move that infrastructure that workload to another venue? And we're finding many of our clients saying, I prefer to have less footprint on premise, and I'd start to want to move that workload to one of the hyperscalers. So the first thing we talk to clients about is understanding what that application is, what that workload is, what its dependencies are, and whether or not it's fit to move, and then assist in moving it. Now, the thing about lift and shift is, I think, and it's really, really important, is that the journey shouldn't end there. If all you're going to do is pick it up off-prem and put it down on a hyperscale, I think ultimately you're going to become disappointed and disillusioned in cloud, because you're really not taking advantage of what the platforms are beginning to offer today. And the migration or the move, the lift and shift, should be the first step in what ultimately becomes, and Greg, you went through it, is what becomes a modern application journey. So how do you move it to an appropriate venue? And then once it's there, how do you then take that application and begin to modernize it? And in some instances, that might be, as people talk about, tinker. So you begin to change some of the underlying database and some of the underlying components and start to use platform as a service that the cloud providers offer. Or at some point, you may actually choose to re-architect that application. And exactly to what you went through is you look at it, developing it and using modern application development methods and tooling in order to deliver something that scales far better, that's more agile. And as you said, it's container-based, uses microservices, and really provides you an application that ultimately is fit for purpose and kind of built for the future. Now, what is important to understand is when you do lift and shift is to have a very clear understanding of why you're moving that application and what the future for that application is, because it's no good to move applications if it's in a part of its life cycle that you can gain no additional value by modernizing it. In some instances, it's better to leave it where it is, or move it, but then just run it in a very steady state. So lift and shift is often the first step for clients as they move to cloud, but it certainly shouldn't be the last. There really does need to be a program and a long-term vision about how that workload evolves over time.
That makes a lot of sense, Jeff. So thanks very much for the context and the insights. I can't help but agree with you on the lift and shift kind of stuff. And I think many customers want to lift and shift their workloads and think it'll be cheaper, or that's not my problem because it's now running in somebody else's data center. And to your point, we often get surprised by that. And we've seen a lot of customers get surprised by the bills that come at the end of that because they thought it would be cheaper, or they thought that the problem would go away. So spot on with that particular point. Mariana, I'd like to hand back to you to say thank you very much for the insights and the questions, and back to you.
Wow, I'm loving these conversations. What an informative episode. Jeff, Colin, and Craig, thank you so much for your insight and for your comments, and just for the practical examples of how we can just take advantage of hybrid cloud. To everyone who joined us during the session, I hope this conversation has inspired and equipped each one of us to take a look at our cloud and digital transformation strategies and to realize the benefits, the risks, the do's, but also the don't do's. We would like to hear about your success stories. What are some of the key benefits and business advantages you are experiencing by adopting cloud? So please leave your comments in the section below, or connect with us, or go to some of the relevant websites and social media channels, and please leave your comments. We would love to hear from you. We look forward for you to join our part 3 of this series. So now let's go and do more. We'll see you at the next episode as we discuss the challenges and opportunities around skilled workers and services. Bye.